Hi everybody, my name is Jimmy and welcome back to Jimmy Does Knitting. This is my knitting podcast where I pick a topic and we go from there. Today is a very special project video. I tend not to do a lot of these, but this one warrants it. If you're new here, I am Jimmy Does Knitting on Ravelry, Instagram, Ko-Fi, Discord, all of the things. Hit me up there. Let's get into it. So today is a very special video. Like I said, I am doing I've just cast on my epic knit, my magnum opus project for 2024. And what I've determined that to be is recreating a historically accurate Guernsey or Gansey, however you know it as. I'm making one for my brother-in-law, hi Robin, who is from Cornwall, and he really liked this idea. He's very knit-worthy, and I think it would be really nice to do something that would be like something his ancestors would have worn. So, the closest thing that I've knit to a Guernsey before is this. So this is based off of some Dutch motifs. I would say it's a Guernsey style. It's about worsted weight gauge. I made it up and then I've modified it a bunch so it fits me better since. This is one of my oldest knits, but it's one of my favorite. I really like a Guernsey style sweater, and I think that I'm going to also make one for myself if I'm going to be honest. But here's the deal, is I have some resources, we'll go over that. I have some yarn, we'll go over that. And then I'm making things up as I go along because that is what the knitters used to do. And we will discuss why I've made some design decisions. We'll discuss why I'm doing certain things, and we'll get all into it. So as of now, I really don't know how this thing is going to look, but that is why we're doing this journey. So there are a couple resources that I thought we would get into before I even start. So YouTube has a bunch of stuff. There's some stuff on fruity knitting. There's a couple of videos elsewhere. I think Gilpin is a really good resource in terms of her interviews. They're a little in the woods and not the most entertaining stuff, but they're incredibly informative. She's an expert and they're super good. So I have that. Then I have books. So let's go over the books. The first one I got was Knitting the Netherlands. So the Dutch did have Guernsey culture, and I live in Amsterdam. So I wanted to try to get something like that. This is based off of a lot of the motifs in this book, but I did this as a first one. I guess they tend to be a lot more simpler in the Netherlands, but I don't know. And I have all these markers because some are for this project, but also I tend to use these as stitch dictionaries. The Guernseys really had really nice stitch patterns and stuff. So this is Knitting in the Netherlands, traditional Dutch fisherman's sweater from Henriette van der Klift-Tellegen. So there's that. I have this, which it was written in the 50s and is the Bible. According to Dee, it has some mistakes, which I think it was just misinterpretations of reading stuff. So this is Patterns for Guernseys and Jerseys and Arams, Fisherman's Sweaters from the British Isles by Gladys Thompson. And these books are all old school. The charts are X's or dots, dashes, and the patterns for a full Guernsey fits on 2 of these size pages. So that's something, and it has beautiful examples of Guernseys and actually Aran sweaters, some basic sweater recipes, some stitch motifs, and yeah. So it's a good all-around resource. It has some exposition in the front, and it also goes through certain locations. And then I have this, which is Cornish-ish Guernsey and Knit-Frocks by Wright. I was tipped off for this by Anton Belmonte of the Raw Wool Company. He had the Scilly Guernsey, which was based off of Cornish motifs, and I said, do you know where to find specifically Cornish stuff? Because a lot of the stuff is not Cornish that I could find, and he recommended this book. And so this is what I'm using in terms of stitches and certain things there. So that's what it is. It goes through a little bit of exposition. It has some sort of like some patterning, but not so much. It's mostly like a little bit of history, some stitches and stuff like that. But it's a really, really good resources. And in all of these books, there are some phenomenal pictures. They're hard to read. So what I originally was looking for is a Guernsey from the place where he's from. Did I find it? No, but everybody just sort of like made it up with regional motifs as they went. And so that's what I want to do using the Cornish motifs. So that is that. Next, we have yarn. So the history is, at first, they did it with whatever yarn they had, in whatever color they had, and they made the sweaters. When commercially available yarn became available, what happened was a little bit of like standardizing-ish, and they would do them in all different colors and stuff, but traditionally there was like navy blue is the one that you think of. That's the one they wore, I'd say, the most for working. There was a gray one for like church, and then like a white one for a wedding. But then they came up in all different colors. There were a couple of areas that had unique colors. I know that in the Netherlands, some went for like a lighter blue, and I think somewhere there was some red. So that's what happened once the Guernsey yarn was gone. I bought some yarn, and this yarn is a very specific yarn, and it's really cool to work with because I don't really have this type of yarn. I've never worked with this type of yarn before, but it is specifically a tightly wound 5-ply yarn. I would say it's heavy fingering, light sport-ish. And what that does is it, one, creates beautiful texture because the spin of the yarn really like allows for the air capture, which is what they needed, because they would wear these sweaters on boats as their like working gear. So they needed to be like windproof, weatherproof. So the yarn is like a really cool construction. It's amazing for texture. If you want a textured knit that this would fit the gauge of, go into it. What I have done is I bought 6 cones of this. I don't know if I'll need that many. I sort of just estimated and went for it. But this is the Woolyknit British, what is it? 100% British wool 5-ply Guernsey. And when I saw them come out with this yarn, I was really curious to test it out and see what it is. I really like this yarn. I don't know if you can tell. It's like really round. It's a super round yarn, and it's very like springy and like squishy in a way that like you don't normally get. Let me see if I can show you this. But it's like has a lot of elasticity just because of the way it's spun. It's not merino soft, but it's also really not that bad. So I didn't decide. His wife decided we're gonna go with the traditional navy blue color, which is this really dark navy. I don't know if you can even see it, so we'll see how showing this thing goes. But that is what I ordered, and I approached the people from Woolyknit about doing this project with me, and they kindly gave me a discount in the yarn just to be transparent. So I got this for not full price, but it's a really amazing yarn. It's perfect for this. I mean, it's exactly what I needed. So I'm very excited to be working with this yarn, and I really actually enjoy doing this. So that is my sources. That is discussing the Guernsey yarn. There are also some other companies that do stuff. Frangipani is another big one, and I think they have a very wide and broad color range. I think they also only come out in cones. And there are some other ones. Oh, by the way, these are 250 gram cones. This is the color navy. So this is what I'm using. Let's get into what I've done. This is what I've done. It is a decent amount of knitting at the moment. Let's go over needles. Traditionally, they would have used like super long DPNs because they didn't have circular needles. So they would have been like this long, and they would have done like 5 needles to do like the circumference of this. A Guernsey is knit bottom up in the round. The front and the back yoke are separated. They are roughly knit flat. There are some variations. There's some sort of neck shaping or bind off or saddle, and then the sleeves are knit top down. And so what happens with that is when these people work, a lot of times they drag the nets through their stomachs. So there was usually like a band of color. Right here you can see, the motif starts here and the rest is stockinette. So they could potentially rip back and then knit down for the body if had too much wear. And same thing with the cuffs and the sleeves. If it had too much wear, they could just rip back and then re-knit the sleeve. And then there are a lot of historical examples of that. So that is the basic way of doing it. There are a couple of cast-on variations. So there's the Channel Islands cast-on, which looks really cool. It has like a little bit of a picot edge. I did not go with that because that is not really found in Cornwall. There's also a double cast-on where people use 2 threads or 2 strings of yarn for the first few rows just to make that bottom like really nice and sturdy. I think that's found a little bit more like Yorkshire way, so I did not do that. What I did is I cast on using the cable cast on method. Now, this is not my preferred method, but we did it because that's what's historically accurate. And then most of them had 2x2 ribbing for like 2.5 inches. So that's what I did. I am still knitting this at a tight gauge. These are 3.25 millimeter needles. Historically, these would be knit on anything from like literally like a 1 millimeter needle up to like maybe a 3 millimeter needle, because we wanted this to be like waterproof, weatherproof, dense, all of that stuff. So this was super, 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 super tightly knit. This is still tightly knit, but the most he'll be doing with this is like chasing his son at the park. So I'm not gonna cast on like a ton of stitches. Like for my size, I'm not a big boy. For my size, they're like cast on 400 stitches. And I'm like, I can't do, tight knitting for 400 stitches in the round and get this out by the time that this needs to happen. So that was an executive decision. It may or may not be historically accurate, but that's what I decided. Woolyknit suggests a 3 millimeter for this. So I'm not too far off, and it still creates quite a dense fabric. I don't know if you can see that here. Well, you can see the light coming through. It's not blocked, but it's still a pretty tight knit. So we have that, and I did the ribbing for 2.5 inches, and then I started working in the round. Now they would not use stitch markers typically because they didn't have them, and they had the needles to keep track of things. So what they would do to indicate the halfway point is, let me find this feature. They would do, I don't even know if you can see this, but this purl bump. So they would have just a single purl stitch indicating, this is half and then this is half on each side of the sweater. So that's what I did. It's just one purl bump. Some of the recipes don't mention it, but I know that it was included in all of these. So that is what happened with that. And then one more thing that I need to talk about now, and then we'll talk about what I have planned future, is, what am I talking about? This, which I think is a funny talking point, and then the in-laws will love at Christmas. But each Guernsey, I don't know if you can see this. I hope that this is turning out all right. But do you see this knit purl texture? I'm hoping you do. But these are initials. And so what they would do back in the day is they would put people's initials in their sweaters. One, it indicates the back, but two, if they got lost at sea, which happened quite frequently, I guess, and washed on shore, then they would have their initials to help identify them, as well as the pattern. So a lot of times the knitters, who were the women in the family, would be able to identify a body however state it was in via the pattern and the initials that they would do. So I put the initials in the back. I just got a chart off of like a pixel chart of like initials offline, and I incorporated that into the back. So that is what I have done so far. What needs to happen next is I'm going to continue knitting for a bit, and then I need to decide on motifs, which means I need to buy some graph paper, because I have just like a little tiny book, like a A5 like book of paper, and it's not big enough. So I need to buy like bigger sheets. I think a lot of times when people design these now, they use like huge sheets of graph paper and like tape them together and do that. So I need at least something bigger that I can work with. And then I'll do some sampling and take you along with me on that. But what I want to do is I like the ones that have like a little band right here-ish. So the part where you can rip back to, and then like the motif on top. And it has some ideas about what I want to do for the motif. I'm not so sure about the band. And then, I don't know. I guess we can get to it. So I'm not sure if I'm going to knit a sample on something else and then see how I like it, or if I'm going to knit this up and like rip back and knit up and rip back and knit up and rip back. So we will see how this goes. But I'm very excited about it. I mean, at the moment, it's stockinette in the round. It's like super, super easy. Not that creative. There are some other features that we will go over when we get there that are really unique to Guernseys in terms of construction, and then why I decided to do some things certain ways. So I have some plans. I'm not really quite sure. We'll go through it, but I wanted to touch base and at least get like the start of this documented, so we can, you know, we're all dealing with the same things, and then we'll see how this goes. Because I'm at a point where, even though there are a lot of stitches, I think this is 264 stitches in the round. I mean, it's stockinette, but I can get through that pretty fast. I'm not like a super fast knitter, but I'd say I'm faster than average. So I can probably get through this faster than I should. But then we need to make some design decisions. And so I will be referring back to some historic pictures in the Cornish book for the motifs. But I don't want to say too much because I think we'll get there. Anyway, I will catch you back in probably a couple weeks once I've made some decisions, and we'll go over some charts and some ideas, and we'll go from there. I'm very excited about this, and I already am like planning one for myself because I love it. I absolutely love it. Anyway, I will see you soon. Good morning, everybody. This is my hair. We're going to have to deal with it. It is September 3rd, and I wanted to give you an update. This thing is going fast. It's going way faster than I thought. I don't know why. I do know why. It's because I don't knit stockinette in the round very often, and I'm a somewhat quick knitter, and it's just flying by. And so I have some progress to show you. Let's get into it. So far I've used maybe half a cone of this yarn. It's very exciting because I have 5 of these cones, and I would say I'm almost to the gusset of the body. So I've knit from the bottom up, and I'm like here-ish, the under boob, and I have about half a cone. So I have 5 cones that I ordered total, which means I think I can get this out of 3 cones, which means I will be forced to make myself my own Guernsey, and it's going to be tough, but I'll get through it. I swear. But let's get into this and some design decisions that I made and like what's up next. So this is what I have so far. If it doesn't fall off the needles, which it is. 1 second. It's quite a large circumference, so it's bunchy a bit. But this is the back. So we have plant matter from me knitting out by the canal. And we have this much. So what's happening here? I have done the ribbing with the cable cast on. I have the letters in the back for when he gets lost at sea. I have the 1 stitch purl bump. It's like a faux seam kind of here. I don't know if you can see that. But what they did, I think, was to use it more of like keeping track of where you are in your garment. It doesn't really add any strength. I don't understand the faux seams. You can knit things in pieces if you want seams. I don't think it adds any structural integrity. So I think it's more of a keeping track sort of thing. And then the motifs. So this is what I did. So, well, let's back up. Quite often there's like a band around here of stitches, or like a band of color, not color, but like a band, and then you have like the motif for the yoke. And I was debating whether I wanted to do that or not, and I decided on yes, because I noticed in the Cornish book that there were a lot of these like 3 purl row bands sort of thing with a moss stitch on top. And so I wanted to do the 3 purl moss stitch and then another 3 purl, which I just started on the first purl, to make that sort of thing. I didn't see any of the 3 bands. It really wasn't as big in the other books that I had, so I'm assuming that this is Cornish-ish. And I know that I say Cornwall funny, so for all you Brits, I'm sorry, but this is my accent and this is what we're getting into. So I wanted to do the 3 stripes with the moss stitch, and then another 3 stripes, and then I'm going to measure where we are. I'm going to put this on like really big needles so I can get like an accurate length, and then I need to figure out where I need to do the gussets, because I'm just sort of like knitting. I knit to like, I don't know, 8 inches, and then I decided to do this motif and it takes up however much space it takes. So I need to decide what the front motif is, how long this needs to be before I start the gussets, and then kind of go from there, which is a little bit more thinking. It's not hard. I think the biggest problem is going to be where the motif is and like what it is, because I think that there are so many options. I have some ideas of some traditional Cornish motifs with like other things that I like, so we'll see about that. So that's kind of where I am at things. I did do this moss stitch, which I haven't seen elsewhere and I've never done before. It's a really cool one, and I think it gives a little bit more movement, and I've only seen this stitch pattern in the Cornish book. What it is essentially is like knit a row and then knit 2, purl 2, or knit 2, purl 2 for a row, and then like knit a row, and it has this sort of like, I don't know, like the wave cap sort of feel for it. And I thought it was a little bit more like movement. I listened to this one interview and they said that like the Cornish Guernseys are quite like lyrical and movement, and so I thought that this moss stitch had a little bit more like flow to it, and that's kind of what I want to keep in with some of the motifs. I want them to like move a little bit as opposed to some other things that I really like, which are pretty just like straight up and down. So that is the latest update. I'll probably show you once I'm done with the purl row, and I don't know, we'll see where this goes. Your guess is as good as mine. It's mid-September. I've gotten to a crucial point where I need to actually make some decisions. So let's see what we're working with and what's going on, and we'll go from there. I did have the opportunity to babysit a dog yesterday. Her name was Susan. She's a fox terrier who got her first haircut. She's beautiful, but that means I got to design. So I have in this notebook all my notes for the sweater, and what I needed to figure out now is I finished the band on the front. I need to figure out what the yoke is looking like and what the gusset details are. So I went into some books that I had, not this one, but another one for the gusset stuff, and I modified it to fit my gauge because they knit it such a tight gauge that if I were to do the same rate of increasing, the gusset would be like really deep and awkward. So I've modified it a little bit, and then I have chosen a pattern for the main yoke, and this is it. So this is the fancy fancy knitwear design stuff. Just some notes on the motifs and what's going to happen. So just so you know what to expect, there's a stitch called the musician stitch, and I wanted to modify it because I like it and it's very Cornish, but it's not me as a creator, and half of this is like what the designer would do, so we want to stick to that to some extent, but also add something in that is more, I guess, reflective of the maker and the knitter. So what I've decided is the musician stitch has like V's and some moss stitch. So I decided on V's in the center with like cables, and then the moss stitch flanking that. So there's like V, cable, moss stitch, cable, moss stitch. And then the moss stitch allows for the correct stitch count. This is the stitch in question, and so you can see the moss stitch in the V's. I wanted to incorporate elements of this, but I didn't like how plain it looked, I guess, for all over, and also the stitch counts weren't going to be correct. So I wanted to incorporate something similar, but not quite. As you can see, the moss stitch is the same as the one that I chose for the band. So let's go back to the band and discuss what we've done. So we've done I did 2 purl rows, 3 knit rows, 2 purl rows, 3 knit rows, and then I did this moss stitch, which we've discussed before. I thought it was like very kind of flowy. It had like a little bit of a rhythm to it. It was a little bit different one than I've used before, and so I thought that would be like the moss stitch to use for the sweater. So when we do the moss stitch on the yoke, that's what we're going to do. Now, I probably should have measured this beforehand and figured out like where the gusset would start, because ideally the gusset would start right here for the underarm, but I didn't know how big this thing was going to be or whatnot. So let's just kind of take some measurements and see where we are. Now, I wanted the width of this to be approximately 24 inches. I just have these on long needles. I haven't blocked it. We're 24-ish. That's all right. So we have that, and then the length. The length is 13 inches. I think I want it to be like 17-ish inch yoke, so then I can just start the pattern. I'll knit that for about 4 inches, and then I will start with the gussets and the splitting of the yoke. So that is the plan and how we're going to proceed. But it's a really fun knit, it's an easy knit, it's a nice knit, and I still have this left of my first cone, which is actually quite a bit of yarn. It's more than I thought I would. I thought I'd be going through this stuff much faster. So that is encouraging, and we will get to it. I will see you at the gussets probably. All right, we are back. It is now fall officially. It is sweater weather season, all exciting stuff. That also means terrible lighting in the Netherlands, which is why this is somewhat blown out, because I have my ring light on like super high, really close. But let's get into it. I've been doing some work. I feel like I've been ripping out a ton too. But here we have the sweater. It is separated. The back and then the gussets are on hold, and then the yoke you can see is starting to be knit up. So this one I ripped out a couple of times because I was like, why are these cables looking so funny? And I had to fix it. So what I have done is there's this chevron pattern right here that I think is really nice. That was part of the musician stitch. And the deal was, it was like this moss stitch in between these, but I like a cable. So I decided what I would do was do these 3 in the center and then put cables and then have these be filler stitch, because these are different stitch counts. And this is the same moss stitch as this. So that is where I came up with that. I have no chart, don't ask me for it. I'm literally just like making it up as I go along. So what is exciting? We have done the gussets. So what this gusset is, let me try to show you, is can you see this right here with the things? This triangular piece of fabric, which is also on hold. Maybe I can pull this up. So what this does is it makes it so the sleeves are not as baggy, I guess. What would happen is you didn't want to get your garment caught in the nets. If your garment was caught in the nets, you would be going overboard, you would drown and die, and we don't want that. So as part of that, what we would do is gussets. So normally the yoke would start where I started my gusset, which was just about here. And that means that the armhole, the arm circumference is wide enough, but it's also tight enough because this gusset reflects on the other side to make it movable but not loose. None of these drop shoulder, like big oversized sort of garments. That's not what they wanted. So they wanted freedom of movement, but they wanted something that's not going to catch. So what I have done is I have used, well, this book right here, the patterns for Guernseys, Jerseys, and Arams. And this is the one that had the most information about gussets on it. And it has a completely different tension because these people were knitting with like 1mm needles and it was crazy. So I changed the stitch count based on educated guess about like my gauge. So what I have done is I think the width of the gusset is okay. I made it 20 stitches and then I increased every other row because those were the pattern rows here. There are more easy rows in this and there are more engaging rows, let's say. So on a more engaging row is when I increased. Now, I do think that this might be a bit shallow. I don't know. I've never done a gusset before. But everything else said like once every, 3 to 6 rows, depending on what gauge you were using and what pattern you were using and all this other stuff. So I think that this is okay. It's probably about 2 inches. What is that, like 5 centimeters of gusset, which should be okay. But, he's just going to wear this to lay around. So I'm not so worried about that. So that was the gussets. I finished 1 cone of yarn. I've like just started a new one, which is crazy because this is a big garment. So this one is roughly 48 inches wide, or in circumference, not wide. Oh my God, that would be huge. And it's used up yarn. I think I switched right about here. So I haven't used much. And I'm like really pleased with how far these cones are going. I'm assuming it's going to be about 2.5 cones for this, but we'll see. I'm always terrible at estimating yarn. Let's get into the pattern a little bit. Can you see this? Let me try to show you it. I wanted something with a rhythm with cables. A lot of the ones in the Cornish Guernsey and Knit-Frocks book are quite plain, I guess. And this is plain, but I wanted it to have a little bit of cabling, some texture, make it be a little fancier. So that is where I'm at. Next steps. We are going to finish the front of this, and the plan is to knit the front yoke and make it into just a regular drop shoulder with a 3-needle bind off. There are a couple of variations depending on where you are, but I think for Cornwall it is just the 3-needle bind off and a regular drop shoulder is fine. There are some neck options. Let me see if I can show you a picture. I think this might be the clearest picture that I could see. It's really just like a mock turtleneck, I think a lot of times is what happens. Here you can see like a 3-needle bind off, and these are relatively plain jumpers, I guess. And we wanted a little bit more interest, we wanted a little bit more fancy. But yeah, so there's a mock turtleneck that kind of comes up. There are a couple with a full turtleneck. I will ask the recipient's wife, my sister-in-law, if he would like a regular collar or not. So we'll get there when we get there, and we'll make that decision then and see what happens. So yes, I am going to go until the body then reaches 27 and a half inches, and then we'll tie it off, do the back, and then we'll be done with that. And then I have the sleeves, which will be exciting. All right, kids, we have an update. It is Sunday, the 13th of October. But I wanted to get to you because I made a milestone. I had a couple of days this week where I was just out. So I was able to sit on the couch and knit a ton. So this is what we have. We have a body, which is very exciting. You can probably see the back better because of the motif. So this is the motif that I ended up doing for the back. I really hope that you can see this. It's dark yarn. But what I ended up doing, and I think I've discussed this in other videos, is this like chevron center, the musician stitch, and cables, and the same sort of moss stitch as before. But look at how the cables and the chevrons sort of like go together, that the same rhythm. So I finished knitting the body. I did the collar based off of, well, all of these things, measurements were based off of my Troy Boy pattern. So my sister-in-law gave the chest width, and then I kind of did the measurements from my grading from my Troy Boy. Now the Troy Boy is a different gauge and a different construction, so I couldn't use the math, but it wasn't so hard. I did, you know, a neck sort of thing. I've checked with her. I think we're going to do just a regular collar neck, not any of the thicker ones that sometimes they had. I think when I do one for myself, I want like saddles and like a little bit of a turtleneck, but that's not what's happening here. I used a traditional 3-needle bind off for the shoulders, which I think it's one of my favorite ones. It gives great structure. I don't know if you can see this, but what you do is you turn it inside out, and then you use like 3 needles to bind it off, and it is really this like solid seam. Everything matches up quite nicely on the main side. So yeah, the body is done, and I'm super happy with it. It was a lot of knitting, but we got there in the end, and I think it will be good. Now, is this as dense as a regular Guernsey? No, but I mean, I think it's going to be fine. So that's what happened with that. I still have my gusset stitches on hold. You can see that light blue yarn. So when I pick up for sleeves, I'll pick up those, and then I'll decrease via the gusset, and then I'll decrease on the underside of the underarm. And then, yeah, collar is next. It looks quite large at the moment. Part of that is because with this sizing, I have like a larger collar than I prefer for myself. And part of it's, you know, it rolls. So there's a little bit of a roll to it. So when you actually pick up the stitches to knit it, it's gonna tighten in quite a lot. That is the body. Next for me will be the collar, and then I'll do the sleeves. So the sleeves, I'm going to deviate slightly from a Cornish Guernsey. They live in York, so it will be a Yorkshire motif on the top of the sleeve. A couple things that I wanted to go through. In terms of yarn, I used up 1 cone, and then we have this second cone has this much on it. And then the third cone has this much on it. The reason why I dipped into 2 cones is because when I do shoulders, especially if I'm designing, I really like to do them at the same time. So I go like the full row back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you know, you can't carry the yarn over the neck opening. So I attach another ball of yarn, or in this case cone, and I go through like that. And it is what works with me. That way I know they're even. That way I think it works out great. So that is what I have done. And I, you know, same thing with the 3-needle bind off. I did it, you know, with 1 cone, chopped it, another cone, chopped it. So that's exciting. We're gonna knit a collar this weekend, probably. And then we'll start on the sleeves, and I'll keep you updated with that. I have a little bit of math to do with that, but it's not so bad. With collars, what I tend to do is just pick up. So what works for me usually is one stitch for one stitch on the like horizontal, so like stitch for stitch, and then for the verticals it's every other stitch or every two to three stitches depending on how the collar is and all this other stuff. But I need to have it multiples of 4 because like the bottom ribbing, it's 2 by 2. I want to keep that in the collar. I think some people do 1 by 1. I'll keep it 2 by 2, so multiples of 4. Nice round neckline, you know, 1.25 inches. Maybe I'll extend it to like 1.5 inches, so it's a little tighter or a little higher up, but not so much. And then we'll hit up the sleeves. So that is the mid-October update. I'm just gonna do like a sleeve cap texture, but no sleeve cap shaping. Aside from the gusset and like the decreasing underneath, and the rest is just going to be stockinette and a 2 by 2 rib for the cuff. So that'll probably be it, and then I'll do it on the other side. So that's, in this gauge, probably 3 days per sleeve. Not much. I don't have much work left on this. So in today's installment, we have a finished neck and sleeve, which is very exciting. It is October 18th. I will for sure finish this by the end of this month and then sit on it until Christmas. For the bind-offs, I just did a regular bind-off just because that's kind of what I thought that they would use, but I'm not really quite sure. Anyway, it's a 2 by 2 neckline. I just picked up some random stitches. And then I have the gusset done, which is very exciting. So that's this diamond piece of fabric. Can you see that? And what this serves is it raises the yoke a little bit so it's nice and tight, but it also provides mobility with the arms so you can really like move, because this was a working garment sort of thing. What you did not want is your sleeve to catch and you to be dragged with the nets into the sea and drown. That would be bad. So the gusset was what they did to do that. So I did this part up till half with the yoke, and then I did the rest when I picked up the sleeves. So then therefore there are rapid decreases, and then you can see slower decreases. And I always just mark my decreases with one of these stitch markers, and that's it. So as you may remember, the whole thing about this was a traditional Cornish Guernsey, and now here's the part where I'm a liar. This is actually a very Yorkshire motif, and I put that in because they live in Yorkshire. So this should be enough of the arm and a little bit of the bicep, and this 3-stripe thing mirrors this 3-stripe thing. So you have the sleeve cap, the 3 stripes, and then just the regular part of the sleeve. I hope this isn't too long, but that's what we're going with. That's what it's going to be. And I'm going to replicate this on the other side. So that is the Guernsey update. And then I guess I'll come back when it's all done and blocked. But it's looking very good right now. I'm very happy with the motif, and I'm very excited about this. One other thing I wanted to mention was I bought 5 cones, and this is what I have left of my second cone. I did dip into the third cones a little bit because I did 2 at a time, like fronts. But I have this for the second cone, so it really only takes about 2 cones. This is way more than I need for a sleeve. And I have some more Guernseys to make, I think, but that's a whole different time, whole different video. Just wanted to check in for now, and that's all I got. I'll see you later. All right, here we have it. We have a finished Guernsey. I'm very happy with this, and I wanted to get to you at this point because look at it. It looks ridiculous. This is what it looks like before blocking. Specifically, look at these sleeves. See how like the texture really makes a difference with gauge? And then this band right here is just like huge. And so I'm really curious about how this is going to block out and even out. Of course it will a lot more. Some of it won't. Like I hope the ribbing really stays in. But this is the sweater, and I'm very excited. I stayed up late last night to finish this. In terms of yarn, I have this much of my cone left. It's an all right amount. So I've used like one cone and then this, so I don't know what happened. I overestimated yarn. I had five of these cones, so I have like 2 more Guernseys I can probably make out of this stuff, which is outrageous, but that's good to know. So this needs to take a bath, and then I will get back at you. All right, kids, are you ready? It is that time of year where the sun doesn't come out, so I just have one light like blasting me, so this is going to be blown out, but the Guernsey is finished. It is done. It took a while because it's fingering weight and it's a bit of a larger size than I normally knit, but it is beautiful. So I'll take you through the Guernsey, but first let's go through the wool. The wool is the Woolyknit cone 5-ply Guernsey wool. It is in this navy color. Once again, it's quite like springy and like high twist. This is the second cone that I used. And so I ordered 5 cones. I don't know why. I have so much yarn, so I can make probably 2 more, or at least 1 adult and another children's one. I'm going to take this with me to the UK just in case there needs to be adjustments on. I'm worried about the collar and the cuffs, but we'll see. That's easily changeable and I'll snip snip. So that is the yarn. I really enjoyed working with this, and thank you Woolyknit for giving me a little bit of a discount in order to make this project possible. So let's get on to the Guernsey. Hopefully I'm putting in B-roll as we go through this because I am probably not going to show it well and the color's not going to come out just because of the lighting and the space and all that. So B-roll playing somewhere around here and it's done. So this is the Guernsey. You've seen, I think, most of this. Here's the body. This is the sleeve that I decided to do. It's very exciting. This was like my epic knit of the year. It wasn't hard to do. I think that these are probably the most simple sweater patterns to make, but it was just something that I wanted to do for a long time, and I used actual Guernsey wool, so it took a long time. Let's walk through the sweater really quick. So I started with the cable cast on and I did 2.5 inches of ribbing. On the back, I have the initials of the recipient, just in case they get lost at sea. I knit up until where I wanted to, and then I did this motif that I saw with the 3 bands and then this different type of moss stitch. I haven't really seen that anywhere else, so I decided to incorporate it, and then I ended it with the 3 bands. And then I went into a yoke that has the musician stitch with cables in between, and then I used the same moss stitch as a filler stitch on the side. The yoke was just knit straight up. There was no shoulder shaping. I just did neck shaping, and I did a 3 needle bind off on the shoulders, which is probably one of my favorite bind offs just because it's so solid. I then did the neck, also in a 2x2 ribbing with just like a regular cast off. This way I can pull it out pretty easily. And this was all the Cornwall stuff, which is what was, I guess, requested, my doing. But I wanted to incorporate a little bit of York, so this is where it comes off piece. And that is this sleeve stitch right here. And this is the Betty Martin stitch, and I love this stitch. I think it's pretty, it's fun to work. I think it turned out really well. There's some patterns on Ravelry with this stitch that I really like. I might do a scarf. I'm not really quite sure, but I like this. And then I did the 3 bands to end the arm, and then some stockinette and whatever ribbing, 2.5 inches of ribbing on the bottom. So I am concerned that the pattern on the sleeve may be down a little bit too far, probably by the elbow is kind of where my calculations are. It's fine, it's whatever. It's the same on both sides, so it doesn't matter so much. I think that I would have made it shorter back, but the calculations seem to have it fit like right here-ish. If you look at my elbow, like here-ish. But we'll see how it wears, because you never know with like a drop shoulder. I'm not exactly sure how much ease this is going to have. It would look fine either way, and it's a hand-knit garment that's beautiful. The one other thing to mention is the classic Guernsey gusset that I did, which is just instead of like, you know, picking up stitches around the armhole, you add some stitches here, and then you decrease rapidly in the sleeve, and you have this diamond as this gusset, and it comes out like this on the side, but it's a diamond when you knit it. Can you see this? Hopefully you can see this. So that is a walkthrough through the Guernsey. This will not be my last Guernsey, as I have said in previous podcasts. I don't even know if I've said here, but I use basically Guernsey patterns as stitch dictionaries. So I have like 3 or 4 Guernsey books up here, and I definitely have more Guernsey motifs that I want to make. I have this wool, so I will make myself an authentic Guernsey, but I want to do something different. And yeah, so I'm very excited about this. I hope the recipient is very excited about this. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. It's been a couple of months. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope this encourages you to get crafting and start making your own sort of thing. You don't have to make a historically accurate, Cornish Guernsey, but play around with things, have some fun. This is a super easy start, and it looks great on many bodies, so I highly recommend. Anyway, that is it for today. I remind you to be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Don't be apathetic, and I will talk to you some other time. Goodbye.